The poem that I'd like to read on this dark and stormy winter night is by Sir John Betjeman, and it is called On a Portrait of a Deaf Man. Now, it could just as easily be called On a Portrait of a Dead Man, because the poem is as much a meditation on the nature of death and decay as it is a reminiscence of the man depicted in the portrait, who is deceased and happens also to be a man who it hints has been deaf throughout his whole life. I really like the poem. That's why I wanted to read it. I only read poems I admire on this channel. Why? One thing I really like is, although the poem is very morbid and kind of depressing, it also captures the idea that this guy, the subject of the poem, the guy in the portrait, who's never mentioned by name, despite not being able to hear, got quite a lot of enjoyment from life, and the narrator of the poem enjoyed sort of knowing him, and it talks about the other things that he liked to do with the senses he did have, the pleasures that he derived from the world. Just another thing to mention for those of you who are not Londoners or have never visited London or know nothing about our geography or whatever, there's a couple of references to Highgate Hill, but least of all he liked that place which hangs on Highgate Hill. What it's referring to here is Highgate Hill Cemetery. During Victorian times, there was a huge overpopulation problem in London, not just of the living, but also of the dead. There weren't enough grave places left, not enough plots to continue to bury the dead. And the Victorians built, industrious always, built a handful of enormous cemeteries, which were called the necropoli, the cities of the dead. Highgate's probably the most famous one, partly because it has some of the most famous residents among them. Unfortunately, the communist degenerate Karl Marx, who continues to befoul that place, I don't think such a person is worthy of any sort of a burial, but there's no justice in the world. So anyway, that prejudice left aside, this is On a Portrait of a Deaf Man by Sir John Betjeman. The kind old face, the egg-shaped head, the tie, discreetly loud, the loosely fitting shooting clothes, a closely fitting shroud. He liked old city dining rooms, potatoes in their skin, but now his mouth is wide to let the London clay come in. He took me on long silent walks in country lanes when young. He knew the name of every bird, but not the song it sung. And when he could not hear me speak, he smiled and looked so wise that now I do not like to think of maggots in his eyes. He liked the rain-washed Cornish air and smell of ploughed-up soil. He liked a landscape big and bare and painted it in oil. But least of all, he liked that place which hangs on Highgate Hill, of soaked Carrara-covered earth for Londoners to fill. He would have liked to say goodbye, shake hands with many friends. In Highgate now, his finger bones stick through his finger ends. You, God, who treat him thus and thus, say, save his soul and pray. You ask me to believe you, and I only see decay.